Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this week's session of the Milton Warrant Committee. Lynn, would you please take the roll for our attendance?
Sure. We have John, Lorraine, Mohammed, O'Henny, Steve, Aaron, JJ, Scott, Dave, George, Kristen. Is there anybody I missed? That looks to be it.
Okay, and Lynn, we have meeting minutes that you sent around for January 3rd already?
Yes.
Okay, and everybody has received those?
Yes.
Okay, terrific. So the chair will entertain a motion to accept those meeting minutes of January 3rd. Do we have a motion for that?
Good night.
So move.
Oh, thank you. I was going to say, it's rare that we get a fanfare for meeting minutes, but I'll take what we can get. So we have that. Are there any changes, alterations, amendments, additions, deletions, spindles, foldings, mutilations to the meeting minutes of January 3rd? Hearing none, Lynn, please take the roll.
John,
Yes.
Lorraine,
Yes.
Mohammed,
Yes.
O'Henny,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Aaron,
Jane.
Yes.
JJ,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
George,
Yes.
Kristen,
Yes.
and Christine just joined us as well. Christine,
Terrific. Hi, Christine.
this is the meeting minutes from January 3rd, Christine.
Unless you have any changes or anything.
Yeah.
Terrific. Okay. Meeting minutes are accepted. Thank you very much. We have as the primary item on our agenda tonight, we're happy to welcome the members of the school committee and Superintendent James Jett of our Milton Public Schools to present the budget for fiscal year 2023. All of you should have received hard copy and various emails. So you have electronic copy and you have hard copy. So James, I'll hand it over to you to manage the presentation. We will suspend the 7-minute per speaker rule, but be aware that at some point, we, unlike other committees in the town, don't go until midnight. I mean, some of us, fall asleep at a certain point in time because we have other jobs. And we will appreciate brevity because we're looking at numbers, and numbers tell you basically all you need to know. And the justification for those numbers is what we're looking for. So you have the floor.
Thank you. At this time, I'm going to elevate Dr. Elaine Craighead, who is the chair of the Milton Public Schools School Committee Finance Subcommittee. And she's going to make a quick opening statement, and then it'll turn over to Amy Dexter, who will share her screen with the budget presentation. Dr. Craighead.
Thank you. And thank you all for having us tonight. In the interest of time, I won't make a lengthy opening statement. Just suffice it to say that it's taken months to get this budget presented to the school committee and voted on approval by the school committee this past Wednesday the 19th. And this is mostly due to the work of the finance committee and especially Assistant Superintendent Dexter and Superintendent Jett and his leadership team. As Chair Asher said, you should have received your budget books on Friday, as well as some additional details today about salary and wage numbers at the position level. If you need any additional detail about any aspect of the budget, please feel free to reach out to me, Assistant Superintendent Dexter, or Superintendent Jett. Some items in the budget are listed as ARPA possibilities. I assume on the warrant committee, you know what ARPA is, the American Rescue Plan Act. None of those things that are listed as project 3 or 4 that you'll see in the budget have either been vetted or discussed, certainly not approved in any way by the select board. So they're listed as potential possibilities, but we put them in our priority list as they fall. All of them, ARPA and non-ARPA, are crucial needs due to enrollment and the pandemic. We also recognize that money is tight. Nobody knows that better than me, having served on finance for all 6 years I've been on the school committee, chairing it for 5. And we know that there are needs across town in all departments. Our duty as school committee members, though, is to advocate for the needs of the Milton Public School students and to help the district to maintain a high quality education, to do everything we can to address the learning losses and the social emotional needs that our students have due to mostly the pandemic, but for other reasons. It's not so much a question of, at this point, even moving the district forward, as it is toward trying to regain our previous levels of achievement among the students. We are presenting the rollover and the top 10 priorities for our budget, but we're also including all of our needs after those top 10 priorities in the interest of full disclosure about the depth of Milton Public Schools needs at this time and moving forward. So Assistant Superintendent Dexter and Superintendent Jett, and I believe at least one other member of Milton Public Schools is going to take you through the presentation at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're grateful that you came, and we acknowledge and express gratitude for the work that you do, because you are one of the people in town, I think, who has a thankless job after a fashion. And it's a lot of work. It is a lot of work. So your committee is to be complimented. So anyway, again, thank you very much. And we're interested to hear the rest of the presentation.
Okay, with your permission, Chair Asher, would it be okay if I share my screen?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you.
Hold on a second.
And to many members of the Warrant Committee, Amy Dexter is no stranger to the Warrant Committee. And we're delighted that she's in this position, because for so many years, she made clear so much of the town budget for many of us who have been members of this committee, and for the town meeting over a number of years. So we're looking forward to the same level of enlightenment. And you know, she does have big shoes to fill, because Glenn Pavlicek did it for so many years as well.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
And is it large enough? Okay. Okay. So this first slide presents the FY23 Milton Public Schools rollover budget, as well as what I'm referring to as a needs-based budget. And the classifications on the left-hand side is how we're required to report to DESE. Most of the bulk of the expenditures are in the instruction line. That's where most of our teacher salaries, instructional supplies, any kind of textbooks, materials lies. Second largest piece is special education. That includes special education salaries and wages, tuitions for out-of-district placement, transportation of those students to those out-of-district schools and whatnot. As you can see from here, 45.7% of the budget relates to instructional leadership, and the next largest category is special education at almost 28%. This slide just shows that same information in a pie chart form, again, highlighting that the instruction category accounts for almost 46%, next largest special ed, And as you can see from here, facilities, policy, and admin, technology, very small part of our budget.
Amy, can I interrupt you?
Sure.
When you're talking special ed and instruction and leadership, the instructional part of the budget,
Mhm.
are the special education teachers included in that, or are they broken out separately and put in
No.
special components?
All special education expenditures are in the special ed classification, including the teachers, instructional aides that support those special education teachers, the transportation, the busing, as well as any supplies they may need.
And how many students in the town are benefiting from special education, either through ed plans or through services that might include residential and off-site services?
So we do have a supplemental schedule in the back of the presentation, Schedule 3, which
Right.
shows historical trends in the enrollment. So for the 21-22 school year, we have seen a significant increase from last year, going from 779 special education students to 865. That's as of last week. That number is ever changing. There's another, and Susan could confirm this, another 50 or so or more kids currently being evaluated for services. This is not all out of district placements. This also includes in-house special ed, not in-house, but in-district students that we're able to serve in our buildings and our schools here in town.
Right. Okay, thank you.
So that's about almost 20% of the student population for the current year. Okay. Next slide just shows the budget again in different categories. As you can see from here, 82% of the budget includes salaries and wages. That includes, back to your last question, not only regular education, but special education teachers and aides, instructional aides. Contractual obligations, which includes things like all the non-salary special education costs, the special ed transportation, tuitions, as well as contractual obligations like legal, regular ed transportation buses, accounts for 14.4%. Anything that's non-salary, that's not falling into one of what we're considering contractual, is this other category, and that's only about 2.8% of the budget, or $1.6 million. So we have very small amount of expenses where they're what I would consider controllable because they're non-contractual. So even though our budget is very large at $58 to $60 million, is very, very little classification where you can actually say, I'm going to cut back on that, because a lot of these special education are not only contractual, they're legal mandates. We have to service these children and provide what they need. It's legally mandated. We cannot control the fact that we need to add a special education instructional aide or a teacher in order to meet these legal mandates for the children. This slide, I think, is very helpful because this will get anyone who's looking at the Milton Public Schools budget request from where we currently are in fiscal 22 appropriation to what I'm referring to as the rollover budget. And I think I actually probably should have defined that for you. So what the rollover budget is, I'm taking fiscal 22 appropriation. We're adding contractual wage adjustments and legal mandates in the way of some headcount in special education, meaning some special education aides and teachers that we're legally mandated to have in order to keep the children's services where they need to be, along with any other contractual obligations. And that gets us to the rollover budget. So the biggest part of the rollover budget is the salary and wages at about 2.1. There is an additional amount in the salary and wages that we're referring to as the special education disproportionality. There's more information with a link in the back of the presentation to that. We could invite Susan Maselli back at a later date if you'd like her to explain that more. But basically, there's certain things that we need to do to address the special education disproportionality in ways of positions that are now the grant funds that we have to pay those out. We used to pay some special education instructional aids out of that. We can no longer, so they're shifting over to the general fund budget. And then the next largest piece of the non-salary is the special education transportation and out-of-district tuitions, which is almost 600,000. So that gets us to a rollover budget of 58 million. And then the needs-based is what Dr. Craighead was referring to as all of the needs of the Milton Public Schools that the school committee should do their duty is to advocate for what the schools need. So we broke it down into some different categories. We're not referring to them as tiers, but top 10 priorities, then 11 to 17. There's also a large item there for new curriculum that Superintendent Jett will speak to later in the presentation that could possibly be funded with one-time funds as it doesn't occur every year to get us to approximately 60,500,000 for the needs-based. This slide is, I think, very informational. Actually, I'm going to look at a couple of notes on this one. So this slide is total expenditure per pupil. This came up at town meeting last year. A few of the town meeting members were asking questions related to this. What the total expenditure per pupil consists of is the general fund school operating budget, all of the expenditures that we pay for out of grant funds, revolving funds, as well as an indirect allocation, indirect cost allocation from the town departments, which include things such as health insurance related to Milton Public Schools employees, a portion of the finance director, town administrator, treasurer salaries, things like that that get allocated. So out of the 401 districts that are reported on the DESI website, Milton falls in at 315. That's number one being the community that spends the most per pupil, 401 being the one that spends the least. So Milton is 315. And if you also notice, Milton is one of the very few communities. Now, this list consists of local districts that Milton tends to compare itself to for other metrics. So we're 315 out of 401. Out of the comparable districts, we are number, where am I?
12.
We're number 12 out of 14, and we're below the state average. The state average is 17,575. Milton is 15,508, and it's one of the few that actually went down. We're presenting 2019 to 2020 because 2021 has not yet been calculated and isn't available. This next slide shows the same exact information in graph form, just to give you a visual. Milton is third from the bottom in this graph. And there's also links on each of these pages to the DESI website where you can find this information, or you can look up other districts' information as well. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Jett, and he's going to talk about more about the goals of the district as well as the top 10 priorities.
Thank you, Mrs. Dexter and Chair Asher. This goes to your point in the beginning about making a connection as to why these positions that we are asking for are very important. I want to assure the Warrant Committee and those who are in the viewing audience that any budgetary request that we're asking for the purpose of student achievement, student support, but they're linked to a strategic plan. They're linked to the superintendent's goals and the school committee goals, along with our individual principal school goals. The three pillars that we're talking about is personalized learning, safe and supportive schools, which you often hear about social emotional learning, behavioral health, and then the equity in learning. And when I say equity in learning, providing or eliminating the barriers that prevent not only historically modularized students, but special education, providing opportunities for all of our students in the Milton Public Schools. So for the sake of this slide, it boils down to making sure that we put things in place, that we provide all students with the opportunity to reach their individual potential and hopefully expand upon that. Next slide, Mrs. Dexter. Again, what we included in there, just so you knew what we were talking about when we talked about personalized learning, social emotional learning, behavioral health, and also the equity. I don't want to read to you because I know you have already mentioned it. Time is of the essence in terms of this, but I think it's very important that these slides will be up on our website. These slides will be communicated to families, and we will be doing a public budget sessions with families. But essentially, these are our three pillars that we're working on in the definitions are right here in this presentation. Amy Dexter, next slide. One of the things that I wanted to highlight is a few of the goals that we have for the Milton Public Schools, and that is to make sure that all of our students in K-8 demonstrate grade level proficiency in ELA and math for their current grade levels. I would also throw science in there as well. By June 2023, we're do away with some of the disproportionalities that we have with some of our students in K-8, hopefully eliminate them, if not substantially reduce them. We will also continue to evaluate intervention supports and programs to assess effectiveness of each and look at opportunities to implement other research-based interventions or programs that's reaching out to other districts and see what they're doing to make effective gains. We're willing to do that. Also, the research that's out there. Our staff will continue to receive training, and I say continue to receive. We started on November 2nd on trauma-informed training. We want to make sure that our staff are equipped to recognize and support our students in the classroom setting, along with our nurses, adjustment counselors, guidance counselors, along with our administrators. Our SEL advisory team will continue to incorporate measurement tools, the IntelliSpark screener. Most of our students K-12, 4,400 students, only approximately 70 opted out, but they participated in an IntelliSpark screener to assess their social, emotional, and behavioral health well-being and how they are able to deal with stresses within the school community. We're going to use that data to insert and incorporate or enhance the appropriate supports necessary. And we currently have a group of 24 faculty and staff members that are embarking upon the train-the-trainer model. So we're not necessarily going out to get outside consult groups, but working within the staff that we have and making effective gains and providing all of our educators with the necessary support in PD to kind of recognize and support that. All we have to do is turn to any research base over the last 22, 23 months in the pandemic. And what the pandemic has done is elevated the importance of the mental health support that is needed, not only for students, but for our faculty and staff that are immersed in this pandemic as well. And also supporting our families as an extension of the learning environment for our students. Next slide, Mrs. Dexter. So the immediate and future concerns, without a doubt, you've heard us talk about this last year, and we're coming back to you again. We have an increased enrollment in a 40B project. We're right on the horizon. So we just want to make sure that that's on the agenda. We talked about unfinished learning. It sometimes is referred to as learning loss, but I would extend it a little bit before that because we had some gaps and we had some challenges with some of our students at grade level prior to the pandemic, but it's just been elevated, or I would say exacerbated by the pandemic. Enhancing the student achievement for all, and I want to emphasize for all. We do have focus or target areas for a historically marginalized group, in particular African-American student population, but this is making sure that we enhance student achievement for all students in the Milton Public Schools. We want to deal with the social, emotional learning, behavioral health, as I just alluded to. We have a number of students that have really gone through a lot over the course of 22 months, some with anxiety, some with social anxieties now because of the isolation, mask wearing. We want to support all of our students. Then we talk about the professional development to kind of support us with the personalized learning, restorative justice, anti-bias, multi-tiered support systems, social emotional learning, et cetera. And then we have a growing pre-K program. And I think Mrs. Dexter talked a little bit about that. Because of the pandemic, we have a number of students that are identifying as needing additional support. We all know wearing a mask has had a negative impact on phonetics, facial expression, learning with our younger students is a huge challenge. And then we talk about the curriculum review and enhancement, in particular, math and social studies currently. Next slide, Amy Dexter. I know I asked Janet Sheehan, Assistant Superintendent, if she's on here, she could be elevated just for this one slide and she could take you through that if she's there. If not, I would be happy to do that. Janet Sheehan, are you there? All right, well, I'll jump right in. Currently, the Milton Public Schools is undergoing 2 curriculum reviews simultaneously.
James, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry, but go
Okay,
ahead
go ahead.
if you want to.
Yeah, feel free to jump in, Janet, if I miss anything. But basically, for those who don't know, typically in education, best practice is to conduct a curriculum review anywhere from about 5 years, but best practice is 3 to 5 years. Now, a curriculum review doesn't necessarily mean a complete overhaul of any one particular curriculum or content area, but it says we should always be assessing to see how we can make improvements and how are we keeping up with the times. Right now, we we are undergoing the math and the social studies. And so what you have here is a proposal for enhancements in our social studies and math curriculum, and it's chunked out. So this one-time cost, Amy Dexter alluded to this, that we might be able to do as one-time money. If we do that, there is a little bit of a savings. There is a possibility of chunking it out over a course of multiple years, but obviously with interest and things like that, the price goes up a little bit more. So if there's a way in which we could do this in one-time money, this would be more effective. But this curriculum is needed to adjust to some of the changes that we have done in the Milton Public Schools, but not only the changes, but to meet state standards, the Common Core, to make sure that our students are putting themselves in the best position possible to be successful in these 2 content areas. And we could talk a little bit more about that to the general public when we do our public presentation. And I hope members of the Warrant Committee and Select Board will join those meetings as well. Next slide, Amy. So again, Dr. Craig had talked about this in the beginning, so we're going to focus on these top 10, but I do want to bring your attention to the other slides in addition to this that really talks about the overall need. When you look at the math interventionists and math specialists, the reading specialists, that is supported by the recent assessment data that we presented to the general public in December, and then again on January 5th to the general public. We did have a dip in our MCAS scores, Alexia, iReady, our data assessment platforms, showing that some of our students were behind. I think it's also important to note in some communities, and I just want to give this to you, this is in schedule number 5 under math intervention district comparisons. When you look at it, we looked at several other districts, Lexington, Needham, Wellesley, Braintree, Canton, Sharon, and Easton. And we identified a number of schools. Milton has 4 elementary schools as of now with not one math interventionist or coach. In Lexington, they have 6 schools with 9. In Needham, 5 schools with 4.5. In Wellesley, 7 schools with 7. In Braintree, 6 schools with 6. Canton, 3 schools with 3. Sharon, 3 schools with 5. Easton, 3 schools with 4. I bring that to your attention because I think that's important, because when we talked about this last year, oftentimes there's a lot of comparisons about why is Milton not up in the top tier, which I would argue that I think Milton Public Schools is an excellent school district, but we do have areas of growth. One is the budget and one is the support and the staff that we need to make sure that we're making effective gains in the student achievement realm. Same thing with reading specialists. We want to make sure that we have reading specialists to provide the support for our students to bring them up to grade level. Historically, and I think school committee member Ada Roseman has talked about this quite a bit. Historically, we've had a significant number of students that are not meeting with grade level, and we understand that we need to funnel in the supports early on and building a stronger foundation. The Milton High School, Pierce Middle School Guidance Counselor 504 coordinator. People don't really understand that there's students on IEPs, special education qualified, and then there's students that require a 504 that they might not meet the criteria to be on an individualized educational plan, but they might have some sort of challenge or disability, whether it's be attention deficit disorder, whether it be a medical need for a 504, it could be temporary, it could be long-term, it could be hearing impaired. Those are certain things that we might necessarily implement a 504, again, temporary or long-term, and those numbers are increasing because of the supports that we need in students who are not necessarily at grade level. Kindergarten aides, we wanted to increase them, and this is important to know. We already have people in place who are considered to be 0.8, but we need to elevate them to a 1.0. This doesn't have an impact on town benefits or anything like that, but we need these individuals to help us with the supervision and safety of our students, but also providing supports within the classroom. As we all know, some of our most needy cherubs in terms of supervision, hand over hand supports, and keeping students on task is really at our primary grade levels. The school student adjustment counselors, without a doubt, we're seeing it. School anxiety, mental health, social emotional issues. Anytime you turn on any of your local stations, you're going to see some sort of, or at least we have been seeing some sort of elevated crises in various towns with students having some sort of challenges. One of the things I want to emphasize is that mental health is not in supports needed, and hopefully being proactive before it elevates into a more serious crisis is that proactive support. And if we have that and have those people on the ground working with our students and providing that outlet, making connections with our students, we hope we could curtail that before it elevates to a social emotional disability where it's anxiety, and then a student doesn't feel like we can meet his, her, their needs within the Milton Public Schools, and then we're sending students out to an out-of-district placement. And I should put that disclaimer: if students ultimately need to go out, we understand that. But if we could provide the services and supports needed to keep our students in their home community, attending school with their peers in their neighborhood, that's what we want to do. We talk about the special education team chair, particularly at the elementary levels and in the middle school. We need that support. That's someone who's helping to coordinate meetings, evaluations, testing, outside testing that may be coming in, supports and communication with families. And by doing that, we're allowing our teachers to do the work that they're hired to do, and that's to be in the classroom supporting students, making accommodations, and elevating or bolstering up their areas of weakness. And then the same thing with lunch and recess aides. Part-time, we want part-time people to be there. As of right now, with our growing enrollment, we're looking at a ratio of approximately 55, 60 students to one adult. And that's recess and lunch support. We need to make sure, particularly at the elementary levels, that we have the appropriate supervision because safety is paramount. And I would leave it at that. And then our world language teacher at the middle school level. If folks know, you're looking at a growing enrollment well over the current fifth grade. I think, if I'm not mistaken, at last check, it was somewhere around 390 students. They're going to be matriculating up into the middle school, and those students have places that we need to go. We have a very robust world language program that I think is very positive, and it provides our students with a competitive edge as they go on from middle school to high school. So this is a system-wide support that is needed, but it's also needed to maintain appropriate class sizes, particularly at the middle school level. And I think it's important to know we have had so many classes, well over 28 students and above. And we all know that that's not the most appropriate class size number that you have if you're really trying to make effective gains in terms of student achievement. And then the high school math teacher. High school math, High school students are now required to do 4 years of math to be competitive. Some of our students are doubling up, particularly those students who look to pursue a career in economics or some sort of math, post-secondary opportunities. In addition to that, with the pandemic, the goal is to have smaller class sizes to make sure that we're really honing in on those skills and shoring up that foundation. We all know math is a cumulative subject. There's not too many steps. There's building blocks. You can't skip too many steps. Otherwise, you're going to repeat those constant mistakes. So we want to make sure that we have appropriate class sizes where we can enhance the individualized student attention at all levels. So that was a request that we've asked previously last year, but it just didn't make the cut. So those are the top 10 priorities. And next slide, Amy. And if you look at this, I just go through this without that much detail, but I do want to elevate a couple of one. The first one, number 11, if you guys remember, we were very thankful and appreciative of last year's special town meeting in December, where we were awarded 6 positions. One was a science position at the high school level. This is very important for class sizes and OSHA regulations. If you ever came into a high school science class, you'll see that the materials, the seatings are all stationary with gas lines, electrical conduits that are built in. And so when you're talking about chemicals and experiment, you can't overcrowd any one particular class. It becomes a safety issue. So we need that extra teacher. We awarded that last year. And although we weren't able in the middle of the winter during the pandemic without vaccinations being available, we didn't fill that. But I want to make it very clear to those who are listening this evening, we did have a vice principal at the high school, a science teacher at the high school, and a science department head who taught a class to make up for those classes because we couldn't hire a person, find a person in the middle of the pandemic. Then on there's a second math teacher. There's an exploratory teacher when kids are at the middle school for Pierce Middle School and they go off team. So when they're off team, it allows common planning time for the teachers, allow meeting time for teachers with parents to discuss curriculum, discuss student data. Students go into exploratory. We need that balance to maintain, but this exploratory is very important. Civic education, technology, all of those different courses that it could serve as elective to inspire kids and keep them engaged in school is very, very important. We need an early childhood education coordinator. For those that don't know, Jonathan Redden is the principal of the Cunningham School, Dr. Redden, but he's also serving as the pre-K coordinator district-wide, and that includes the Tucker pre-K program in there. Chair Asher, just a couple of seconds and I'll sum up. And then part-time nurses. Without question, they run the gamut in terms of assessment, screenings, eye screening, hearing screening, scoliosis screening. They do the concussion protocol for middle and high school. This is the daily administration of medication in schools, educating faculty and staff, but supporting students with asthma, diabetes, whatever the case may be, setting up medical safety plans. It is important that we have those supports, and we were already understaffed. I think we said that last year when we were talking about this. The ideal recommendation for elementary is 500 students to 1 nurse. Should be lower than that, but 500 students to 1 nurse. As you know, there are 3 schools at the elementary level, Cunningham, Collicott, and Glover, that are well over 500. In fact, they're over 600 students. And at the secondary level, Pierce and the high school, the recommendation is 750 students per nurse. And right now we're well over 900 students at the middle school and over 1,100 students at the high school. That was pre-pandemic. Now you throw the pandemic on there with contact tracing, testing, stay, now this new testing initiative, communicating with teachers. Our nurses have been working in the evenings, on weekends, and during vacations, making sure that they're communicating with families, faculty, and staff to set up the best possible scenario to support our kids during the pandemic. Next slide. And then I won't go into this, but in greater detail, I think Chair Asher mentioned that, but the numbers speak for themselves. If we want to put ourselves in a position to support our folks, when you look at certain things like PD, if you look at that line for professional development, it says 77,900. For simple math, if you if you put 100,000 in there and you divided that by the 650 faculty staff, support staff that we have in the buildings, that comes out to no more than a little more than $100 for professional development. When you're putting, or the community's putting their prized possession in our care for the safety, the education, and the well-being and the support for our students, that's really not a large ask. And I do hope in the near future to have what other districts allocate for their professional development, but I didn't get that information in time for this to present. But there's a lot of work and a lot of priorities that are tied to the strategic plan of the district, school improvement plans of each individual schools, my goals as a superintendent, and the school committee goals. And I just ask for your due diligence and your support to really go through and understand where we are in comparison to other districts. And I understand our budgetary system is a little bit different than other districts, but if we're going to be compared to other districts, we should compare the support in terms of the budget and staffing that they have, and to be comparative in that way as well. So thank you for your time. And at this point, I'm going to yield my time and afford folks to ask questions if they need to. But please know that you have supporting information and additional slides. And for those who are viewing as parents or guardians or community members, we will be doing community budget meetings that afford people opportunity to ask more detailed questions. Thank you very much.
Superintendent Jeff, thank you very much. Is there any other individual that you brought who you think might be helpful in completing the presentation or peremptorily answering some questions that might have arisen?
Yeah, so Susan Maselli, who is the Director of Pupil Personnel, for those who don't know what that is, that's the Director of Special Education. She is on the call and she is here in the event that there are certain questions that may come up regarding special education, regarding some of our goals. But between Sue Maselli, myself, Janet Sheehan, and Amy Dexter, and even members of the school committee, if you have questions, we're here to answer those.
Excellent. Well, I could start out with a couple of questions. I'm looking at the total district needs above rollover, and that calculated out at 2.4 million. I was looking at your priority list of 17, and you've got 8 positions that have some component of ARPA in them. ARPA request yet to be approved. And those positions total, just the salary at 529,187, $529,187, some of which will be subsidized by ARPA. Now, I'm assuming that those are positions that would continue after fiscal year 23. Is that accurate? They're not just one-time positions that we're getting because of ARPA.
Amy could speak to that, but I would definitely like to say these are positions that we need continuing forward, but we put them in ARPA to apply because we don't know where the resources are going to come from. But these are positions.
Right. Well, Amy, but I understand that, and I don't dispute the need at all. The question is paying for them, and that we have ARPA as kind of sort of helping us out. That's fine and lovely, nice and wonderful for 1 year, but the town will have to sustain that increase, that $529,187,000, in addition to other new positions that also include an HR director for $110,000, in addition to the math and social studies curricular requests that are being made for another $589,000, which brings us to a total of $1.3 million. Now, I know that the $589,808 for these curricular request is a one-time thing, but can you or someone there enlighten us on 3 things? First off, what are these things for? Secondly, when was the last time these curricula have been replaced? And thirdly, isn't that what a department head is supposed to do, come up with a curriculum? Why are we in fact paying twice when we're paying the salary of a department chair who's supposed to come up and approve curricula and then go and buy something off the shelf? I speak that not to be difficult. I'm saying that because I just don't understand. And there are a couple of other things like that also. I mean, we have the 110,000, I'll continue, 110,000 for an HR director. Isn't that what the superintendent and the assistant superintendents are supposed to be doing, the HR business? And why do we have to pay for that? So you can take those questions in whatever order you want.
Amy, you go ahead and then I'll follow up.
Okay, so I'll answer the ARPA question.
Yep.
The items that are listed or captioned with a comment that say ARPA have not been approved by the select board to be funded through ARPA. These are things that the school committee and the leadership team have put forward for consideration. They've reviewed our first two projects, 1 and 2, have not vetted anything else. So the reason why we noted this here was that there is a possibility that they could be funded by ARPA. It would not be ongoing. The most it would possibly be would be through fiscal 24 because the ARPA money has to be spent by a certain date. So
Right.
that's why we included 2 columns. What the request is, what the cost of those items that or those needs are, and what the total cost if we were lucky enough to get approval for these to go through ARPA funding, what it would be. So I just need to be really clear. These are not approved. If they're not approved by ARPA, the need goes unfilled if it's not through the operating budget. So we felt that it was our due diligence to list them. And in the event they are funded and approved by the select board through ARPA, then they could come off this list. But right now, they're not even at the stage of being vetted and evaluated by the select board. So that's
So-
one.
So if they're approved and funded, do they disappear after 1 year? I mean, the high school math teacher, the math interventionist, the reading specialist, the guidance coordinator, et cetera, they're only short-term hires. We wouldn't have to be funding those going forward.
Well, I think that the request is through fiscal 24, but depending upon, I mean, nobody knows how long this pandemic's going to go on and what the true effects on these children are. So, you know, it could possibly, the need could be there after FY24. Also, the select board may decide to fund them through ARPA, but maybe not the full 2 years that we're requesting for. So it's an unknown at this point. I think
Okay.
that, yeah, there's a strong likelihood that we would still need these beyond the ARPA funding. But the need's clear right now.
There's definitely a need to continue these positions beyond the funding, and I'll tell you why. We all know that these 40B projects are coming online as well. Our enrollment is going up. When people move out of the town of Milton, Milton's a well sought after community, and when people are moving in, they're moving in with children. And those whose students may be out of the Milton Public Schools or out of school in general might be considering downsizing or moving out because the equity in their home is pretty significant. So that's one thing. To answer your question about the curriculum, you are correct. We do have department heads, curriculum coordinators that do the curriculum, but they don't write the books, the textbooks, or the materials that we give. Just like we have a IT director, the IT director does not create or make the Chromebooks or the devices. The IT director or the educational technology specialist is on hand to help implement best practice to utilize them. The textbook or the materials is just a tool. The curriculum coordinators work with the teachers to develop the PD on how best to execute or implement or using those tools to get the best out of our students. So I do want to do that. And I know Member Ross Denny wanted to talk about the human resource proposal.
My question also included what is the nature of the curriculum and when were they last revised and how frequently are they updated? I mean, should we expect to see this annually? Is it something you can get away with for 5 years? When was the last time it was done? How effective was that implementation? Have we spent $250,000 2 years ago and now we're throwing it out the window and replacing it with something else? This is what I'm trying to get at, because if we have finite resources, and we all know we do, then a judicious use of the money is what's in order. So I'm obliged, we, the Warrant Committee, are obliged to ask these questions because the town meeting will vote you a lump sum, and then it's up to you to spend it. And we have to be sure that what we know goes into that calculation of the lump sum is justifiable, so the town meeting can have as informed a discussion as possible. So these questions about the curriculum, because we're talking about close to $600,000.
No, I get it.
At the end of the day, we're going to end up parsing this down as we do every year and, robbing Peter to pay Paul. So this is the question that I ask as we go through this. I'm absolutely certain you've gone through this with a fine tooth comb, but we need to understand it a little bit more.
Sheehan?
Yes, so I would say, so the social studies curriculum that's going to be proposed is for kindergarten through fifth grade at the elementary level. I don't have the exact number of years, but I believe it's at least 10 years since we looked at a curriculum in social studies. We purchased the Discovering Justice curriculum many, many years ago, and that program is now outdated. Since then, we purchased some atlases for our elementary classrooms, but we really have not implemented a comprehensive social studies curriculum. And I would say it's approximately 10 years.
Okay.
And we need
And
materials.
do these include books and devices, or are they online, or
Yeah,
is it a mixture of all these things?
Most of the programs are online, and there's a component, perhaps like a workbook component, because these are inquiry-based programs, but they are multi-dimensional, and they're also connected to the standards. The program that we have in place now is not what we call standards-based. We also anticipate that social studies is a content area that will be tested soon. And we very much need this social studies program. In math, they're looking at K to 12, and that the price tag is high on account of the scope of the purchase. The math program, we probably, I would say, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, we updated the everyday math program. Again, we're looking at new programs that are more linked to the Massachusetts standards, and it's time for a change in math. Math is changing like many of the content areas are, and we want our students to be up to date and competitive with other district programs. The curriculum coordinators have formed committees that are representative across the district, and they're following a very specific protocol in reviewing these programs, and they are considering cost as they look at them. The math committee is further ahead than the social studies committee, but this truly is a need.
And how old is the existing math curriculum at the high school and middle school, and even the elementary? The elementary level at 250,000 takes your breath away.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. At the middle and high school, I can't answer that, but I certainly can get an answer for you.
I would be interested to know, because as I said,
very happy to do that.
Yeah. If we're going to drop almost $400,000 here, we've got to understand what we're buying.
Of course.
When you actually do the math on that math curriculum for all the elementary schools, it's 62,500 for each school. So it's really not that far out of line than the high school curriculum we are asking for, just so we all understand the number.
No, I understand that, but we do run the risk. If you remember back many years when Everett Dirksen was the majority leader in the Senate, he would say $1 billion here, $1 billion there. Now you're talking real money. This is our tax money, and I get emails from people and accosted by people saying, "What the hell are you people doing with our tax money?" And so
right,
I feel obliged.
Chair, I understand that, but the way that you framed that wasn't correct, because it's not just math curriculum for one elementary school, it's for 4. So I just want folks to understand that. That's all, Mr. Chair. Okay, so let's just apples to apples.
No, but I understand it perfectly. It's still a big number.
And if I could just make one last statement, the reason why it also might look very hefty at the elementary school, because every single teacher at the elementary school teaches math. Every single teacher at the elementary school will teach social studies. They teach every single one of the content areas at the elementary level, whereas the middle school and high school, you have specific math teachers, and not, even though you got the same amount of students, but they could utilize that material a little bit differently.
Thank you.
I also have information from Brian Seelig. He's the curriculum director in our math department. the K through 5 everyday math has been in place for 15 plus years. The 6 to 8 Desmos was implemented last year, but it was only for 7th and 8th. They're trying to roll it out to 6 as well. And 9 through 12 illustrative mathematics is getting phased in. Was purchasing curriculum implemented in 2016-17, so about 5 years ago.
Okay, thank you. Questions from the membership? If you want to take that down, I can see who has their hand up. Thank you. Let's see. The first hand I see is Scott.
Good evening. Back to that same slide you were just looking at there. Did I hear correctly that those curriculums are purchased as online? There's software that you buy online?
There is an online component to all of the 3 curriculum programs that we're looking at.
Oh, if that's a one-time cost and it's software online, is it a software as a service model? So is there going to be a recurring cost in that?
I think that there would be recurring costs for the student journals. For the online component, I think there may be a recurring cost, but it's a minimal cost. And we can get those figures for you.
Okay, I'd appreciate that. I have another question, and that's regarding the per pupil comparative chart in the beginning of the presentation that Mr. Jett produced about our per pupil expenditure versus other school districts. Do you have a per teacher wage comparison for those school districts also? I didn't see that or is that already in the report and I've just missed it?
Actually, I did do that, and I just did a comparison for teachers who were master's level first year. Just so you know, Mr. Johnson, it varies on where teachers fall in salaries. It goes by education and years of experience, and we can't predict when someone leaves what great level of experience or year education we're going to get when they come in. But I could tell you I'm smack dab in the middle, and if you give me a second, I will pull that up. But we're behind. I mean, if you look at, I actually looked at Brookline. Brookline for a master's level teacher first year was $60,000, and that was 2 years ago in fiscal year 2020. Here we are in fiscal year 2022, and Milton is around 56 something for a master's level teacher. But I could get that information for you. I don't have it right here, but I do have it on my computer on the office on my desktop.
Yeah, and I'd like it to see it. You know, the per pupil is the all expenses combined that you've given. I'd like to see all the teachers combined per teacher, per capita per teacher, to see where we're falling in terms of with the compensation levels for teachers versus the expenditures for pupils.
Is that it, Scott?
I don't understand what he's asking for. So maybe you could follow up with an email explaining specifically so we can make sure we calculate that correctly.
You've got total expenditure per pupil comparable to other districts.
Correct.
I want
Scott, you were muffled. You've got to repeat that again.
Oh, really? Total expenditure per pupil per district. I want total expenditure per teacher per district compared to others. In other words, I don't want to see it broken down. I want to see exactly a comparative analysis to it. And just you take all the teachers and the salaries and you divide it. That's all.
So I think it might be helpful when you think of the per pupil cost, it has to be lower than the average, or else we wouldn't be 315 out of 401. So just mathematically, you should be very comfortable knowing that we are paying far less than the average. But I'm sure Superintendent Jett will have those numbers for you. Well, and it's probably on the DESE website.
I don't have to know that, by the way. What I see is it's very possible we could be paying less or more per teacher. Okay? We don't know that until we see the numbers. Why are you shaking your head?
I would
It's
like
just
to
be-
know if you're asking for an average salary or if you're asking for total school expenditures divided by the number of teachers we employ, because it's confusing what you're referring to.
And it would be a different number.
Yeah, a significantly different number. The cost, the total expenditure per pupil is something that DESI calculates. I don't believe that what you're asking is something that's on there. I can certainly try to calculate it. I just need to make sure I understand exactly what you're asking for. And it's not
I'd
clear
like
to me
both.
what you're
I'd like
asking
both
for.
of what you just said. That'd
Pardon?
be fine. I'd like both, and then I'd like to see the other school districts, what they're paying. their
So
teachers.
I would need to
I'm trying to
calculate that.
see
So
if
it's
you-
a
let me tell
cost,
you what
it's a
I'm trying to
time
see.
intensive thing. So maybe we can take this discussion offline because
No, I'd like to have the
I'm a little-
discussion here. And because
Well,
it's pretty simple what I'm asking, but what
it
my
isn't
intention,
simple, Mr. Johnson, because it's very
my
confusing
intention,
what you're
I'm
asking.
speaking.
Hang on, please. We are not the US Congress. We have a respectful and a civil discourse. So please observe that. And I'm not saying none of you are being civil in discourse, but let's try the decaf a little bit here, okay? And Janet, you still have your hand up. Do you have something to say or no?
Sorry.
Yeah, take it
No,
off.
no, I do not.
I'm trying to run this meeting and it's like, it's confusing when people don't do what they're supposed to do and take their hands down when they're done.
I apologize.
Accepted. So, Amy, if you know what Scott wants to have in terms of a numerator and denominator, and you can calculate that, you don't have to do it now. There's a little homework for you. I know you're a busy lady, but you're smart and you can do it. You've done harder things. So if we can take that from there, you can get back to him and then we can share it. And I'm sure we're going to have at least one more meeting. And I know the subcommittee is going to want to know things like this as well. So if that's a component of what's being requested and to look at comps, that would be helpful. So Scott, have you got everything you need for this part of the discussion?
Can I just give a quick update on that?
Hang on one second. I want an answer. Scott, have you got everything you need from this?
Yeah, I just want them to see that I'm trying to see where we fall in relation to what we pay teachers compared to other school districts. That's what I'm trying to ascertain.
I get that. And I think that can be calculated. And that's why I think if you and Amy have the discourse, we can see that number precisely with the numerator and denominator you want, and then we can all view that at the same time. And I think that will be a valuable thing to have. And I honestly don't think it's terribly difficult to do. Okay.
Mr. Chair, can I just add one small comment?
Hang on one second, Mohammed. I'm trying to think of who had. I guess your hand was up next.
Yeah. So we're trying to compare apples to oranges, right? Even if you get
we want to compare apples to apples.
Yeah. Even if you get the numbers, then that teacher versus how many students they have, how many teachers in the organization, it's not going to be a fair comparison. I understand what is being asked.
Yeah.
And I think the per pupil cost and then the expenditure for the teachers per school is more representative than the average salaries or whatever you're looking at. Because one teacher.
It's clear that we'll have to look at a couple of ratios and a couple of diagnostic pieces here.
Yeah.
So that's one piece of it. I think it's reasonable to ask, and I agree with you. That's one piece, but we're going to have to look at a couple and integrate it. It's like looking at an analysis is looking at financial ratios and cash flow. One is the photograph, the other is the moving picture, and you've got to do both. And that's what we're doing here.
But my main question is, what will that information help us answer?
Scott, what are you trying to get at, I guess, at that point?
Well, there's many things that may be revealed as we look at different components as for how many students are in the classroom. But it'll let us know, first and foremost, whether or not we're competitive with other school districts in what we're paying our staff. And that may have a lot to do with how good the education is for our kids. We may find out we're not paying enough, and we may find out we're paying too much. That's what I'm looking to find out.
So Scott, if we're not paying enough, I'm going to count on a yes vote for you for increasing all their salaries.
I got a lot of other ideas to make our students do better than just.
I like that idea. Aaron, Scott, don't fall for it.
Well, we haven't even talked about outcomes yet. We haven't even talked about outcome analysis. But anyway, that's another discussion point. I think Henny, you had your hand up next.
I will respectfully say Christine was ahead of me and Stephen. So.
Sorry. Okay.
Okay.
One question. Are if I look at your list of priorities, the number 3, the guidance 504 coordinator, is that all included in special ed and so related, the number of special ed students that went up over 100? Does that include kids on 504s? Is that all in the special ed bucket?
I'm sorry, you're fading out. If you're referring to the guidance counselor 504 coordinator, yes, it'd be a combination of the two. Special education and 504.
Okay.
If I heard you correctly, but you were kind of in and out. So
Yeah, I was just wondering if the increase in special ed demand includes kids on a 504.
the number of students in the IEP that you saw, which was north of 800 and something, that does not include 504. 504s are on top of that. So thank you for clarifying that.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Christine. Steve, then.
Yep. Thank you. Just a point of clarification, in the total expenditure per pupil, does that also include the special educational expenses? Is that all included in there?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, that was easy. Thank you, Steve. Henny, you have the floor.
Well, Steve, that's a good question. So just in terms of the dialogue, because you're right, that drives up the number much that
absolutely
talk about spend so much. And I have a question about that, about what we do. I'm going to take this in order. I have to confess, I haven't had all the time to go through the book. I'm sure none of us have to get this on a Friday. We have a good snowstorm coming up. Maybe it'll be nice by the fire reading, as George says, cozy up with the school committee budget. That's how we're gonna
gripping, absolutely gripping stuff.
George, send us cocoa. We'll all get it done.
If you're doing that during a snowstorm, we have to get you a snowblower or get you a light.
So I just say that, meaning that we will obviously go deeper and want to do that. But I have a couple of questions about about just the presentation overall. Now, and I want to start off with a comment. Thank you. This is the best looking budget I've seen in my short time here. This is clear. You actually lined up the pages, they're color coded. This is Amy Dexter. I salute you. Whoever took good advice, the per pupil cost we asked for. We asked for some of these breakdowns asking for. I see the things we asked for in here. Thank you. It makes it so much easier for us to find ways to grill you. Inquire about the budget.
But Henny, you have to understand, Amy has come before us for years, and she's got the scars to prove it. So she kind of sort of knows what we want to see and how we need to see it.
I understand, but she's calling our boss. She's putting it right in our faces and saying, look and see what you can see. And so I appreciate that. And so I want us to look. So I want to start off with a question, and that relates to the usual. I asked last year a similar question about technology, just at the high level. I know that we said the technology staff. I'm trying to always find, the staff and the budget are separate. So I'm trying to figure out, we're looking for an incremental investment in technology, right? We all said last year that what is the long-term plan? It looks to me that there's been an ask made in capital expense for technology. Is that the long-range plan? Because it looked to me reading it that we have a number of Chromebooks that just went out of service. They weren't supported anymore. So we have our students using materials. And if anyone has a student in the public schools, some of those Chromebooks, your dog will bring them back to you. Let's be honest, we talked about the level and the quality of technology. So is the plan to just a capital ask for long-term investment? That would be my first question. Can we dig in a little bit into that? I don't know who here owns that area.
So thank you for the question. I think you were one of the people that brought it up last year as to why we're doing Chromebooks as opposed to Pro MacBooks. I think this is a huge cost differential. The long-term plan is spelled out in the capital. Think about where we are right now. If we had that in the school budget, that would be up, and we now have it asking for an opera, that would increase the number of dollars. And anybody that's familiar with technology, whether it's your own device, your cell phone, your laptop, or your desktop, there's a turnover in a couple of years, and we're at the mercies of these programs, whether it's Apple or whatever. You got to get the necessary updates unless you're turning it in for trading. That is the nature. We're in the 21st century. Technology is here to stay, and we're trying to do that, but we also need face-fronting individuals to support and educate our students as well. So there is a long-term plan, and we're asking, but we also got to make sure that we're realistic in terms of our budget and where this money is coming from. So again, I think if I recall last year, or Henny, in December, you brought up, I think it was Newton or Needham, I forget, you brought that up. And I would love to be in that position where our students will have it, but we have a challenge of getting the money, and we're very thankful for folks like MFE, Capital, that allow us to get these items to be competitive. We're 22 years in the 21st century, and we're trying.
I agree, Steve. If I may just cross-examine on that, my point was that we should buy, as opposed to just buying the stuff and break like the same cycle, having a long-range plan. So I tried to go to the strategic plan. As much as I love the look of this book, the logo on the front, I asked that we pull that to a strategic plan too. As I said last year, the disconnect between the strategic plan and this, but I just need to see the walkway, right? Ideally, we'd see these expenses, we'd see how they align to your goals, then we'd see how they fit up to some sort of plan. And with technology, I can't find, looking through all this, I cannot find a sensible plan for technology going forward, which I think is a critical and core area. So, so if we're throwing, I just feel like we have to be disciplined in the budget, as my folks have said, as we know the job of this committee. We don't want to throw money away. So I'm just, if there is one, someone can please address the plan for technology, but I don't see it looking through this.
So you're correct, and we could get you a plan for the technology, but this was a budget presentation, but we could definitely give you that plan.
Okay, that would be great. So going on, in the book, so going back to this point about the per pupil cost. First of all, thank you. This is the clearest measure I've seen that can enable us to put our hands on it. And I think it bears saying what you're trying to tell us. If I'm not mistaken, what you're saying to us is we are spending at 315 of Massachusetts where we are, yet we have ambitions to be higher. And so are you kind of telling us that we're getting what we paid for, in a sense, is what I'm taking away, right? If I'm understanding this, but this is based on 315% of increase. Is that correct? The percent of increase, not the total budget, it's percent of increase as a basis. So I think it's some of the numbers that Scott was asking for. I just want to be clear. It's only as far as our percent of increase in budget that we're at 315. In terms of our overall spend, do we have any sense? Am I misreading that?
I'll take that one, James. Yes, we're 315 of our total spend out of 401 districts reported.
Okay.
5% increase. We're the 315 close to the bottom in total. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention that our staff and educators, our teachers, everyone does a tremendous job. And that's why Milton's school system is rated where we are, and why we're so fortunate to be considered a great district is because of the work these teachers and educators are doing with less and less money than our comparable communities or our comparable districts.
Well, can I interrupt? Can I interrupt? And just that begs the question. That with 315 out of 401 tells me a few things. First off, throwing money at a problem never solves it. Okay. First off. Secondly, if we're 315 out of 401, I take that frankly as a badge of honor that we're being judicious about how the money is being spent. Possibly, if I'm looking at the right metrics. I'm not sure I'm looking at the right metrics because we haven't even talked about outcome. All right. Where do the diagnostic feature of a private school is where the graduates go to university. Okay. We don't at public high school, I'm sure it's a very different measure, and I will defer to the experts to that. But I still like to see, what's the matriculation rate? What's the retention rate? What are the MCAS scores? where do the kids who do place at the university end up going, and do they finish? All this other stuff that you have to look at as an outcome. So the fact that we're 315 out of 401 by itself, I don't think is an indictment. I think it's a statistic, and we have to look at that. I think there's a lot more that we have to look at to see where the money's being spent. Is our placement on that 315 out of 401 because we don't have to spend incredible money on student on special ed? Are we spending less on extracurricular activities, less on the sports program, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? So there are a load of questions. So that statistic, while it is worth knowing, I don't think tells us the whole story.
Well, I would like
really
to
don't
make
believe
one
that.
comment as a parent of students in Milton Public Schools, where we see that our MCAS
I'm
scores
sorry,
show that.
you've got to identify yourself and what you're
I'm
doing.
Beverly Rocksteady, and I'm the Milton School Committee member. And I want to share the concerns of families who have children in the schools who are 2 and 3 grade levels behind because of unfinished learning, who I've heard of so many parents whose children are either suicidal or they cannot come to school and they need additional supports. These are things that existed before the pandemic, but the pandemic exacerbated, as Superintendent Jett mentioned. And it concerns me deeply that the data that was shared in the presentation that was shared on Friday, which highlights many of these disparities, we're priding ourselves in being 315 as a badge of frugality, when in fact we have desperate needs for kids. And I think it would be very helpful if Susan Naselli has been present tonight to have the opportunity to share some of the concerns that families have seen and our faculty have seen and have shared at multiple school committee meetings that may not be on the radar of the members of the Warrant Committee, but are worth sharing tonight. So you have some context for why 315 out of 401 is not a winning combination. As someone who's worked in the private sector, I've worked for Microsoft, I spent time at Smith Barney. There are very limited keys, measures of success that most people look for in business, depending on what department you're in. But when you're talking about human lives, there's a lot of factors. And that's why Superintendent Jett has a strategic plan with 3 categories of focus, because it shows that working with students and faculty isn't as simplistic as selling software or selling cookies. I've sold them all. It's much more complicated. And with that, I would like Susan to please add on to this.
Thank you for that. It is the chair of the committee that calls on people. And I'm the chair of the committee. Thank you. I do appreciate your perspective, but we look at the budget and it's up to the committee to determine who speaks, not you.
Well, as a committee member, I would like to hear Ms. Maselli speak about the special ed, which is more than a quarter of the budget. So I'm a member of the committee.
Can I make a suggestion?
We have a request from the committee to hear this. That's the request. Anybody else? Fine. Where is she?
I'm right here, sir.
Okay.
I'm right here, sir.
You have the floor.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to share some of the experiences that Milton is experiencing in education. As you've seen, our numbers of students in special education continue to climb. Speaking to the question a little bit earlier about the 504 coordinator position, I'll share with you, we have over 300 students receiving 504 support. So that's a combination of 800 plus and 300 plus students who are receiving accommodations and modifications through our department this year. That number continues to climb as we respond to increased mental health issues, increased learning, increased developmental delays. One of the greatest impacts we're seeing right now is in our preschool enrollment, and a great number of children who have had lack of exposure for the last 2 years, who are entering our preschool unprepared for school, unready for a preschool environment. The information in the budget captures a piece of the role of special education. And when there's an opportunity to dive more deeply into some of the work that we're doing, I think it provides value and merit to the requests that we have in this year's budget. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
Any other questions on special ed? Okay, let's see.
Mr. Chair, may I?
Oh, Henny, yeah.
I was mid remark. I'll try not to be here all night, and so if people want to jump in on any of the topics, I'll try and raise things that we can jump in. My point, and let me say, Ms. Maselli, thank you for sharing those things. You know, as the parent of kids in the school too, I understand. I know how hard it is, and there we are tasked with a very difficult thing of separating the emotional stories we hear from the budget review that we're asking you to do here. Looking at it from my perspective, 315 out of 4 and just numbers. I don't think anyone on this committee will say this is a winning effort. I don't think that's what we're trying to say. I think we all recognize that that's not leading in Massachusetts. I think we all realize that that's not where we would choose the best for our kids. That I don't think we can challenge that number. That's just the facts. That's just is what it is. But we're trying to look and balance that in terms of the spending that we have, everything, the tax base, and all of that. So I do appreciate those comments. I want to ask about enrollment, if we could. Turn the book to about page 19 or so. The enrollment projections that you all have given us, looking at 07, I'm looking at in the enrollment data, it looks like there's expected to be the increase of 627. You've documented the 40 Bs coming in, so we understand that. What I'm trying to understand then is that you total increase of 545, but that's based off a 2031-32 projection that expects our enrollment to decrease. Is that where is that 2032 projection coming from, and why would we think that the number is decreasing? Because that seems to drag down. Is this an odd metric to skip 10 years and show a decrease using that? I just was curious about that. Doesn't seem to make sense to me. Anyone can help me?
So I took that slide from a presentation from the school building committee presentation to put something in there. We could certainly get additional information related to that, and maybe school committee member and school building committee member Ada Rosemarin can quickly speak to those numbers.
Thank
Why
you.
do we see the tail off?
Yeah. Those projections are put together by the New England School Development Council, NESDEC, which are known as the gold standard for school enrollment projections in Massachusetts and in New England. And the reason that those numbers tail off, and they become less accurate the further out you go, of course, but one of the pieces that NESDEC does not consider is construction that has not yet been approved. And that's one thing that we know about, that we have a pipeline of 5 to 10 40B projects that are in the process of being approved by the town of Milton. They have not yet been approved, so NESDEC has not built those in to their projections, and that's why they show a drop. So these projections are indeed conservative, and we expect them to be higher by the time we get to, 2031 or whatever the end date is.
So in fact, the numbers you're projecting are probably undercounted.
That's right. That's right. Exactly.
I would say, I mean, that in the next graph, anyone who knows the town, I don't know if they make much sense. So just if you can help us, I mean, just realistic projection in terms of realistic costs will help us to better estimate the long-term trajectory of the spend here. And I don't know if other people had any questions on the enrollment numbers while we're here.
We've got to move this along.
Okay.
There are a number of other questions to be asked.
Mr. Chair,
if there's a quick answer to that, that'd be great.
Okay. Well, then I see a lot of hands. I relinquish my time, and we'll come back when
we will. I guarantee you, this is not the only discussion we're going to have on the school budget. So there's plenty of time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Let's see. Next, Kristen.
Hi, thank you, Chair Esser. So I just had a quick question about the ESSER and the ARPA funds that the district has already received. So in addition to what we see in front of us with the ARPA requested positions listed, has the district hired or made any purchases already with the ARPA and ESSER funding that the town will need to fund in the future? If so, what will that cost us once the funding for ESSER and ARPA is exhausted?
So there's a slide in the back of the presentation that shows the positions that have been approved through ESSER, ARPA, as well as some of the special education grants. Again, they've only been funded through fiscal 24. These are the approved projects. So these positions are not included in the needs-based budget because they are being funded out of the grant. So you won't find them in those detailed schedules anywhere. So after FY24, either these go away or we need to find a way to fund them. The other thing that ARPA does include in ESSER is the cost of the benefits related to these positions for those years that they've been approved for. Does that
Thank you.
answer?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. Let me see. JJ, your hand is up next.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering, do we have any statistics compared to other towns on, like, do we have like an average amount of special ed kids? And I'm just curious. I don't know. It just seems like the increase, someone was saying we get special ed kids shipped in. I don't understand, or I don't know. I'm just wondering. No.
Who would
say-
field that one, James or Amy?
Yeah, I wouldn't say we get quote unquote special ed kids shipped in. And I want to change that narrative from special ed kids to students with special needs. I think that's important to say. And secondly, I think that we talked about it. We have a number of students that were, if you think about it, you have current third graders that didn't have a full first grade, didn't have a full second grade because of the pandemic. And then if you go to second grade, you didn't have a full kindergarten or full first grade. And so I think people need to understand that, and that's not isolated to the town of Milton, but I think it's important to share that. And it's growing in all special ed education is not always academic. Sometimes it can be social, emotional. Sometimes, so, and I think the pandemic has highlighted that a little bit. And if I could just backtrack and then to get back to this, to Member Johnson's question, I think it's important when you start comparing salaries, it's not an even comparison. You might get a science teacher to science teacher, but somewhere else they could have 5 years experience. In Milton, they could have 10, or the reverse could be true. But if I could give you some figures, just to do the starting salary for a master's level teacher first year, Brookline, 60,342. That was starting 2 years ago, 1920. Weston, 59,585. Attleboro, 57,38. Canton, 57,562. Wellesley, 57,301. Foxborough, 56,000 and some change. Needham, 56,995. Walpole, 56,802. Milton, and I didn't get all of the districts to respond back, but Milton was at 56,395 for a master's level teacher, first year of experience. So to Member Johnson's point, and it's not a clear comparison because it also goes based on years of service and years of the year. You might find it science teachers, but it just varies based on the years of experience and level of education.
If I can collaborate with Mr. Jed here for a minute, I'd like an opportunity. You just said something that really is very true, that it's not always the numbers. And I think that a lot of times this committee thinks that all I'm looking at is numbers. I have a lot of education in the nature of learning and neuronal function. And you said a word, and it's inspired. And I'd like to introduce an idea while you're reviewing different curriculums of inspired learning. And so that, and I'm talking self-inspired by the students based upon their strategic goals in their life, starting in kindergarten. In other words, those kids, they have their imagination going. It's like crazy. at that age. Imagine if you ask your kids in kindergarten, okay, kids, today we're going to pretend you're 100 years old and you've lived your life. What did you do with that life? Tell me. And then you keep expanding on that question throughout their schooling, and you expand it to the point where they can write. And that develops into strategic life planning. And this is a very different idea of looking at curriculum because it leads to critical life skills. And that's not what we're doing in the schools right now. We're saying we're going to teach them reading, writing, arithmetic. And I know when I was a student, a long time ago, that I never could really draw the dots as to why I did it. But imagine if our kids got inspired to the point where they realize that there's a reason why they're doing this based on their plans, so that when they get into their high school years, how many times do you ask a high school kid, oh, what do you want to do with your life? What are you going to do? And what's the answer inevitably? I don't know. But imagine if every year they had a class in the school where they were doing strategic life planning over and over and over, and they're developing it. I can guarantee you that by the time they got to high school, they'd really have a lot better idea where they were headed, and they would stay in school more readily, especially kids from troubled backgrounds, because they'd be inspired and they'd be mentored into that. But they'd inspire it themselves by you asking the questions for them and unleashing their creativity and imagination. And that's what's missing in this school. If you want this equity movement to go away and have a solution to the problem, the great equalizers in life are education and wealth. And I don't think it's any coincidence that 2% of the population controls 90% of the wealth, because less than 2% of the population ever writes down a strategic life plan. And guess what? Of the 2% that write those statistically, 90% of what people write down happens in their life. So I'm just saying that.
How does this pertain to the budget?
Well,
Mr.
this
Chair.
is my point. Be
Mr.
careful,
Chair, how
Scott.
does this
You're
pertain?
making points where I have a feeling we're going to start to see requests for teachers to do this sort of teaching, and that's just going to add to the budget. So
I would
He'll vote yes. He'll vote yes for that.
I get the point, but if you want to bring it to a close, we really need to move on. There are other people.
It all ties into what the cost is. That's what it ties into.
Everything ties into cost. I agree with that. Okay.
Actually, if I could encourage Mr. Johnson, if he wants to talk offline, that is some of the things that he talked about: creativity, innovation, critical thinking abilities, those skills, along with problem solvers, of what we have as portrait of a graduate. That is talked about. So those are the things that we do in the public schools. So if you have any questions about that, Mr. Johnson, I'll be happy to answer those offline for that. But thank you for sharing that. I do believe that's the best gift, in addition to how to coexist with a diverse community, because I firmly believe Milton Public Schools are a microcosm as a world as a whole. So those are part of the portrait of a graduate that we talk about in the Milton Public Schools, and we hope that that matriculate or passes along with the students as they matriculate to the various grades in the Milton Public Schools. But thank you for elevating that.
Okay, we have two people with their hands up still. Mohammed and JJ.
Sorry, Chair. I'm sorry. I feel like I didn't finish my discussion. I'd like to just finish about the special ed.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
That's okay. I know there's a lot of people wanting to say a lot of things. Really, I'm just going to finish up with a comment on special ed and everything. It's clear that there's a massive increase in need across the board, right? There's when we look, I mean, it's my first year on the board, as I've said before, but we've gone through an unprecedented pandemic, right? And I don't use that word lightly. Like, it's unprecedented sense of loss of life and sickness and all sorts of stuff. But for kids, it's literally unprecedented in the history of the world, probably, because at no other time have we shut down schools for as long as we have. And I'm not going to opine as to whether it was right or is wrong. Like, some people say it had to be done, some people did, but what was done was done. And I feel like it is not it is not being like greedy or it's the time to invest to fix these problems. And I get everyone's suggestions that we have to have metrics to measure this stuff, okay? But I believe people who tell me that there's problems in the schools. And I want to give them money to fix it if they present a plan that fixes it. And, you know, I know that everyone wants to see metrics, and I want to see the metrics too. And unlike O'Henny said, long-term technology. How do we get there? But I want to see all those metrics. But if their metrics are there and it makes sense, I think we should invest money. But that's it. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Okay. Mohammed, you have the floor.
Thank you. And I'll be very brief. So I used to have a manager that used to tell us all the time, you cannot have Neiman Marcus taste on a Walmart budget, right? And so what I mean by that is I agree with you. We have to be judicious with our spending. However, we should not wear the badge of honor that we're spending, you know, with 315s out of 401. So what I would recommend is, can we tie spending to outcome, to positive outcome? I know that there's been saying that, you know, the MCAS scores have dipped, but we have 314 examples ahead of us that are spending, and how are their outcomes compared to ours? And then here's the other thing. Let's not take for granted the hard work that the teachers are doing with less resources, because there is going to be a point where there's going to be a breaking point, and you get that law of diminishing return, and people will start actually leaving to go find better opportunities elsewhere. And then the hole we dig will get deeper and deeper. I'm not saying throw money at the problem all the time, but what I'm saying is you cannot expect Milton to be a premium town with great outcome and have all the kids doing well if we're spending at the level that we're spending right now. I yield the floor.
Thank you all. I think we've heard a very wide.
Mr. Chair, my
variety of
hand is up.
opinions. Oh, I'm sorry. I can't see it because you have. It is okay. I'm sorry. Your hand is up against. No, it's against your drapes. It's against your drapes, which
No,
are a
it's my
sick color.
debris. It's okay. It's my debris.
Go ahead, hit it. You got the floor, Erin.
So a couple of things. I have a specific question regarding the curriculum. And I am a parent of a 7th grade student currently at Pierce. And I'm wondering if the math curriculum has the option to have books with it. I'm finding it's really difficult as a parent to say, show me where you learn this so that I can help him. And I've Googled some things, but that's not ideal. So I'm just curious if you can tell me if there's going to be any books or an option for books with the curriculum.
That is an option that we may have, but it's an online option there. The last time we did this curriculum review, I think Janet Sheehan referenced that there was both the online and an online textbook, also with the textbook. And so that's something we're looking into, yes.
Okay, great. And I just wanted to also say that looking through the budget, because this is about the budget and not a place for us to get on any other box that we're on. 3 of the staff needs that you are requesting is a request again. Am I correct on that? Because from what I remember, town meeting in December of 2020 did actually approve 3 of those positions, but because it took too long to hire, which thank God they didn't do that with the assistant health director, because that took them a year and a half to hire. That was left. So now we're having to reappropriate that funding for that, correct?
That is correct. 6 positions were approved at the special town meeting. 3 were immediately filled. And 3 we had difficulty filling in the middle of the year, in the middle of the pandemic. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I know somebody said, and I can't remember who it was, but somebody said that private schools have more of an option to go to university, and something about career advancement. I want to say, as a parent of a recent last year, I just paid my first tuition payment to a college. My daughter had an excellent education. Was it the best? No. Did she have the best time? No. But she's going to one of the top business schools in the country right now, and that's from Milton High School. And I just want to say that no matter what, we need to spend more, all of those things. But just because you go to a private school does not mean that you're going to make more money. That's apples and oranges, and I'm learning it for the LSAT right now. So what I have to say is we get the quality education that we are putting in, and I applaud each one of you in the administration and the teachers and the cafeteria workers and the custodians. So thank you.
Before we move on, I want to give the opportunity to any of the school committee members who still may be on the call to say things to us that might not be possible within the context of a committee meeting, because I don't know how many of you want to sit through our meetings again. I know you sit through plenty of your own, but if you have things you would like to say to us, we're interested to hear it before we sign off, because I think that we've obviously spent a great deal of time, and this is the largest component of the town budget, and it's the one that deserves a great deal of discussion and oversight from a number of people as well. Margaret Eberhard, I recognize you and thank you for coming. Your hand is up, or did you not want it to be up?
Sorry. I wanted to thank you all for inviting us here this evening and to present the budget and to have a discussion around the education of the students in the Milton Public Schools. I particularly want to thank Superintendent Jett, Assistant Superintendent Dexter, Dr. Craighead, Member Ross Denny, and Member White, who are members of the Finance Subcommittee, and Assistant Superintendent Sheehan for the hard work and the presentation that they put together this evening. Coming here tonight and having people ask us questions that sometimes feel a little bit, I really can't say how I can describe it. I just want to thank them for their respectful, thoughtful, gracious way that they interacted with everyone this evening. A $60 million budget is a huge investment, and I understand that that takes a lot of time and a lot of discussion. So if it takes more time than was budgeted for, I think that's a super important thing. Our school committee meetings often go long, but those discussions are important when you keep students at the center of your conversations. So I thank the Warrant Committee for inviting us this evening. And I thank all of the members of the administrative team and the school committee for coming tonight and presenting this evening. I look forward to further conversations and questions with regard to the budget.
Thank you very much. Ms. Ross Denny, you're recognized. We're interested to hear what you have to say.
Now, I want to share my appreciation for all of the hard work that went into this, and especially having the perspective of Assistant Superintendent Dexter. She was very candid with us as we were creating this budget to say, the town may not be in the position, I just came up the stairs, sorry, financially to support this work. But we all went into this knowing that this is the start of a longer conversation. We are in a town, as we all know, that has limited commercial property. We tend to rely on overrides, and we have a pilot program that's not fully funded. And I've said this during my campaign, and I'll continue to say it, that we need to think of diversifying our revenue sources, but being planful. And having the conversation about how much the school needs versus how much the town can afford is the first step in that process. And we recognize that it's not just the schools. We have police, fire, the many departments that are out within the town hall, and DPW. But if we can all be very planful about what we need, then we can talk about the revenue mix that's necessary to fund what we need. So we're not fighting over nickels. Like a $2 million ask on a $58 million budget. In the real world, you know, you just raise it, you might come up with a new product or a new service. But in a town with a limited budget, you have to be creative. But the only way we can be creative is if we A, name how much we need, and B, come up with a plan to get there. Will we get there 100%? Maybe not. But if we don't plan for it, we never will. This should never be a combative conversation because we all want what's best for the town. And it's difficult to do that when you have budget constraints. But I think we can do this together if we plan for it.
Well, you bring up three terrific points, and I'm thrilled to pieces you brought up the pilot program, because that's something near and dear to my heart. We've been trying to get some of the not-for-profits to contribute in much larger measure, and we haven't had much success with that. But you also bring up, my God, we would love to have had you on the warrant committee for the last 5 years with that perspective of revenue enhancement. It's just refreshing and it's music to our ears. So from that perspective, we don't disagree at all. And I think I speak for the membership of the warrant committee that the idea of funding the need is paramount. The question is, as you point out, it's a finite pie. We can't cut more slices than are there. And if the slices are smaller and smaller, at least we're feeding and we're not starving. So it's a hard exercise. And I think we all recognize that. But from our perspective on the warrant committee, listening to you all elected by the town, what are you hearing from your constituents about what they want, the parents of these kids? If we can just go down that road a little. I know it's a little afield from what we talk about in terms of budgets, et cetera, but we are interested to hear what you can reflect back to us. James, your hand is up. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so first of all, I'm going to say thank you before I forget to say thank you for your presence this evening and your thoughtful questions, and I appreciate it. It's always a challenge for us to find ways to kind of support the school budget, even though this is only my second year. What I'm hearing from parents is they want reasonable class sizes where individualized attention can be given to students. They want class space that's conducive for teaching and learning, which is a challenge again because our enrollment is growing. For those on the warrant committee, we have made some modifications to our buildings already to accommodate the growing enrollment. All you have to do is look at the high school, the Pierce. You have you're utilizing half of the gym. It's a Tucker in an already small school. So oftentimes, and even quite frankly, at the warrant committee last year, there was questions about our enrollment growing and us trying to get into in-person learning at 3 feet or 6 feet apart during the pandemic. Then we also hear that our families are concerned about the unfinished learning and how could we better support them. Most all of the things that I said, with the exception of the kindergarten aids in the recess and lunch aids, are all tied to student achievement and supporting students. Even the nurses in the adjustment counselors, if students are not well socially, emotionally, and they're dysregulated behaviorally, it's very difficult for them to focus on their academics solely. And so our job as educators is to support the whole child. And I know there was references made to private or parochial school. People are paying additional money above and beyond their tax dollars to send their students to those schools. And I will put our college enrollment, which is about 89–90% students going on to a college or university, up to any of those schools. I think that Milton Public Schools does a great job of producing college-ready students, and that is in part through the support that we get from families, the support that we get from our school committee advocating for education, and quite frankly, our support that we get, even though during challenging times, from the warrant committee and the select board. When you look at the town of Milton, the town of Milton historically probably produces the most overrides, and that shows that the commitment from the taxpayers that they're supporting the educational system. So it all goes hand in hand. So I take that opportunity to say thank you. I look forward to future discussions to clarify some of the questions that you had or will have in the future. And hopefully we're all in it for the same thing, and that is to provide our students with the best possible education that they could get, given our resources that we do have. So thank you guys very much.
Thank you. Let's see, Lizzie Carroll, please identify yourself and you have the floor.
Yes. Hi, I'm Dr. Lizzie Carroll, member of the school committee. And I want to respond to your good question, Chair Asher. So thank you for the invitation, but I'll be as brief as I can. What I want to say is what I hear from families in Milton who share their perspectives with me. When I heard Mr. O'Connor's kind of closing remarks, that actually resonated with a lot of what I feel like I hear. Which is now is the time to invest in our students. And having been through this unprecedented experience, which continues ongoing, we don't need to get into all that. But, if there was ever a time to really think seriously about all of these needs that are being presented to you, I feel that it's now, and I feel that because that's what I hear from the people who elected me to serve on school committee. So I did appreciate Mr. O'Connor's articulation of that. I think it's been echoed by many of the other comments of warrant committee members, and I'll just add my thanks for this conversation and looking forward to however it continues on. But that's how I would answer your question in a nutshell. I think it's a lot what Mr. O'Connor said at the end of his remarks.
Thank you very much. Betty White, you have the floor, and please identify yourself and your role, et cetera, for the minutes.
Sure. I'm Betty White, and I'm a member of the school committee. I'm on year 5. And I will say that I served.
You get to go to heaven with your clothes on for that one, Betty.
So I served on the Warrant committee for 2 different times. Once, most recently before I ran for the school committee, I've been a town meeting member for many, many years since I was in my 20s. So I've been here and observing this town for a long time. What I will say is these last couple of years with the pandemic have been exhausting, have been worrisome. Parents are worried, parents are exhausted, teachers are exhausted. But I'll tell you something, one of the best things that I've seen lately is last week at the school committee meeting, Glover School came and made a presentation. Their site council came, which is made up of teachers and staff and their principal. And when you watched their presentation and you saw the videos that they had, the pictures of the kids, you really completely forgot that we were in a pandemic, because what you saw happening with these children was just wonderful. The kids were learning, the kids were smiling, the kids looked great, and it really gave me great hope. But I mean, I think that this town's student population is growing, and we need to figure out a way to help better fund the schools, because we don't have any other choice. We've got lots of needs, we've got lots of students, and every parent and every member of this community wants the best for the children. So I thank you for your time tonight.
No, thank you, and thank you for coming. Do we have any further questions? Oh, James, your hand is down. Okay, because your hand was up a little bit. I didn't know if you wanted to say something further. Do we have any other questions for the school committee or for the administration of the public schools? Thank you. Listen, thank you all very much for your time. I guess I've developed a little bit of a reputation of someone who likes to get through business quickly. And, so if I genuinely apologize to anybody if I have been offensive in moving you along or asking you to identify or whatever, because we do have a lot to do. And I just don't want you to think that I am going to be giving anybody short shrift. We do have a number of perspectives to consider, and running an efficient meeting is something I pride myself on being able to do as chair. So I thank you for your time, and Amy and James and all of the rest of the administration who put together this budget. I've been doing this now for 5 years, and this is probably the most, I would say, detailed, if not easy to read budget we've had. I don't say any of them are easy for us to walk through because it is extraordinarily detailed. And that's the way it should be, because this is a terrifically important component of the town's business, the schools. We are not always going to agree on everything. I mean, this is one reason why we have a warrant committee that reflects, all the spectrums, all the components of the town, political, demographic, et cetera. So for us to have this discussion is tremendously important, and for us to get to a point where we can be supportive of what is probably one of the most important functions of the town, that is to educate our students, our young people, is I think important. And I think when we discuss this, as we go through the process, one thing that is going to be important for us to see and be able to reflect back to the town meeting is not just the dollars and cents side of it, as you, as Margaret, Chair Eberhard and Betty and Member Ross Denny have brought forward, you know, the idea that obviously there's a human component to it. Our ability to understand that helps put what we have in terms of resources to be able to mobilize and to make them available to you, but also to make sure, as the eyes and ears of the town meeting in this analysis, to reflect back, because we are voting you a lump sum, to make sure that it is well thought through, it's carefully vetted, and that we have confidence that what you're doing is reflective of what the town wants, what we can afford, et cetera. Because for all we know, you know, I'm not going to say you do this, you can take the money, put it into dollar bills and light it on fire in front of the town hall. I mean, theoretically, you're not supposed to do that, but I mean, Ed Reform in '93 does give you the purview to spend the money how you like. But I know that's not what we're talking about. But the issue for us is making sure that as we dot the I's and cross the T's, it's not second guessing you per se, it's validating what we understand to be the reality and making sure that we can mobilize that reality to the best value for the town. And so hence, when we ask for metrics that might be a little bit different than how you see it, it brings our experience to the chore, to the task. And if these experiences that we bring are valuable, then everybody benefits. But we absolutely respect the work that you do. We respect you as individuals. I think what you do in terms of the hours that you put in is heroic too. So congratulations for that, because I think everybody here has a day job, certainly on the school committee. This is like we do on the Warrant Committee. This is just something that we do for the public service as well. So if there are no more questions, I have a feeling that we might invite you back, if not next week, then the week after, as we go through and look at this in some detail. The subcommittee, I'm sure, will be meeting with you, the Finance Committee, and the Finance Committee of, just for my edification, of the school committee is, who is on? Betty, are you on that also? Mm-hmm. Betty and Beverly? Your Finance Committee, who else? Who chairs that? Is that,
Elaine.
I wrote it, I'm sorry? Oh, I'm sorry, Elaine, silly me, I should know that after all these years. Okay, and you will have, I think probably 2, if not 3 meetings with the subcommittee as they work through this. And then if the need arises, perhaps you can come back and present to us again, if there are further questions. But you were the main feature of our show tonight. So we thank you very much for your time. I apologize for taking so much of it, but this is extraordinarily valuable to us. Margaret, are you asking a question? Oh, you're just waving. Oh, that's nice.
I'm just saying good night. Thank you, George. Thank you, Chair.
It's hard when we're doing this format. It's tremendously difficult sometimes to see whose hand is up. Whether, you know, because the backgrounds are different, whether you have a, you know, you've got a yellow drape up or the wall is a different color, the hand might. So I apologize if I missed somebody, took somebody out of context here. And I'm just looking through to make sure I don't have anybody else who's asking a question here. Are we all clear now with this? There's no more questions. I'm just, it's a big group, so I don't want to miss anybody if you have something you want to say. Tremendous. I thank you all. School committee members and members of the administration of the public schools, thank you for your time. We're very grateful to you. Again, no offense was meant at all to anybody for moving this along and for trying to keep the discussion organized. If any offense was taken, none was intended. So please remember, we're all neighbors. We're all working for the same end here. So if we don't have any further business, I think the Warrant Committee, we might have a couple of little details to work out for the special town meeting warrant. Maybe we can hang around for 2 seconds, but the rest of you, thank you very much. Have a pleasant evening and keep up the good work. The kids are worth it. Thank you all. Okay, so members of the Warrant Committee, we have a special town meeting warrant that I believe is just about complete. All of the resources that we put to the task, I think, Lynn, you have everything you need at this point except for my letter.
No, George, I think we're going to put that off since it's been moved out to March now.
Yeah, I think we're okay. And the only reason I haven't drafted my letter is I'm still not quite sure whether the fourth, the accessory dwelling unit is going to even end up on the warrant at all. I think this is still a question that is open. I don't know that the select board has decided, and the planning board isn't even going to meet to finalize the language until February. So we do have a little time. So for those of you who scrambled to get it done, that is writing your comments and your opinions, thank you very much. I think we're in very good shape for that. And if in fact there are only 4 articles, and if the accessory dwelling unit is modified, or it doesn't make it onto the warrant, it should be I'm hoping it would be a very quick town meeting in March. So for our purposes, I will ask you, the subcommittee for the schools, to get, who's chairing that, by the way, or who's coordinating that for us? Because we have the members.
Christine last year. It was
Christine, I know
last
you did
year.
it last year, and I wouldn't presume, but
But
I don't know what the schedule of meetings would be after this.
No, I'm happy to do it. I'm familiar now.
Yeah. It's as I say, after having done this for a few years, you do know where the bodies are buried, and you get the rhythm, and you understand how to run things and the questions that you need to ask.
And you know what? Oh, Henny did it with me last year. So
Yeah. We have we have several people who signed on to this. So, the school budget is really terrifically important. They all are, but this is the big nut. And, if you have, I think that there were actually more than 2 people who signed on, if I'm remembering properly. If you can coordinate that and get that moving, that's the biggest component of the budget. I have asked Lynn to, over the course of the next couple weeks, mix in the larger components with some of the smaller. So for example, we would see public safety, which is the fire and the police, with something smaller like parks and recs and the cemetery. So they're not given short shrift, and we're not overwhelmed with hearing the DPW and the police and the fire all in one meeting, because it can be ponderous, because I know we're going to have to see the school department again. But anyway, so for all of you, and your assignments, please be aware of them. And as we have these presentations, please do the follow-up. And if there are questions that need to be asked, don't hesitate, because that's our job. So we will meet next Monday evening. The agenda will be published. Are there any questions, any observations, any comments, any decent gossip, etc.? We all everybody loves it, I know. And men are worse than women, so don't ever for a second think that we don't realize that we all love a good story every now and then. Okay, hearing none, the chair will entertain, since we have none of business, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
John, you can't second yourself.
All right, I want to get going.
I know you do. Scott, thank you. Okay, Lynn, can you take the roll, please?
John.
Yes. Thank you.
Lorraine.
Yes.
Mohammed.
Yes.
O'Henny.
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
Aaron.
Yes.
JJ.
Yes.
Scott.
Yes.
Dave.
Yes.
George.
Yes.
Kristen.
Yes.
Christine.
Yes.
Emily.
Yes.
That's it.
Thank you all very much. See you next week. Have a good week. Stay warm, stay dry.
Good night.
Good night.